going forward for the monarchy, it's so important at this moment that you have someone who is a princess of the people who actually understands it. I would say she's the glue that keeps the monarchy going forward together. And you can see that the king totally accepts the attention that Catherine gets and sees it's very important that she gets that. Put it bluntly, there were a lot of people that, they would pick on her. She was an outsider for a while. And I think she found that very difficult because up until that point, she'd never had anything like that.
Hello and welcome to the season finale of A Right Royal podcast with me, Emmy.
And me, Emily. Yes, it's the last episode of season 3. And just as the royals head on holiday in August, so must we.
Andrea got in there a bit early and is still missing in action.
On a beach.
But it has been a crazy 6 months on the beat.
It certainly has. We'll be reflecting on some of the highs and lows of 2024 so far and discussing the King's summer plans and why he's never really off.
Unlike us, I really want to go to Thailand. We'll also be catching up on the latest royal news, and finally we'll be speaking to royal author Robert Jobson about his new book, Catherine, the Princess of Wales. But first, Emily, what is all this I hear about Prince William firing the Queen's sister?
Sit tight, let me tell you.
So, Queen Camilla's sister. 1, I didn't know she had a sister. 2, I didn't know that she worked for the royals. I mean, what is this story? How has Prince William fired her?
Prince William hasn't
bring me from the beginning.
He hasn't fired the Queen.
I quite like that.
I know you do.
Sounds very dramatic.
Annabelle Elliot is the Queen's sister, her younger sister, and she is a well-established interiors designer. She was working across properties owned by the Duchy of Cornwall. But now, since Prince William has taken over as Duke of Cornwall, he has taken her off the payroll. So that's caused a few ripples and a few headlines.
Really?
But I don't think there's anything untoward about it. She obviously has worked, depending on what the King and Queen have asked her to do. But Prince William's coming at it fresh. She might have different plans. The understanding is that people working on the estate already understand now how things should look. They've learned a great deal from her. But she is actually still working for the King and Queen privately on their private estates up at Balmoral and Sandringham. So it's not really a firing, but that little nugget did come out of the Duchy of Cornwall report that we discussed last time.
So do you think it was maybe something that was, like a long time coming, like maybe she's been on the books and she hasn't really done anything for a long time and it was just a bit of housekeeping, tidying up and I think the press had made more of it than is...
Yeah, it's not been an enormous story, but I think it's one of those things that people tend to pick up when you go through the finer detail of these reports, which is why it's always worth really reading the fine print on them. But yeah, I think it just marks a changing of the guard, nothing more
dramatic.
Nothing more dramatic than that. And as I said, she is still helping to refurbish parts of the private estate. So I know she oversaw the development of a new restaurant up at Balmoral recently. Oh. Another interesting little nugget that comes from the financial reports. Just can't get enough of them.
I honestly wish I had a sister who was into interior design. That's the dream, isn't it, really?
It would be very helpful, wouldn't it?
Queen of England.
Especially if you've got a lot of rooms. A lot of rooms to sort out.
Yeah, she's got a lot of rooms to get through as the Queen of England.
And interestingly, she has opened up a bit in the past about the King's taste and the fact that he's really into the detail. He's very, very interested in the furniture, the fittings and all of that kind of stuff. And she did once reveal in an interview that he doesn't like duvets.
What? What do you mean?
Well, who knows? I mean, I'm assuming he's a traditional sheets and blankets kind of guy.
That's not traditional. What, like traditional as in like Georgian times?
What are you talking about? Come on, the royal family likes its tradition, so maybe.
I know, but, some traditionally they didn't have central heating, and I don't think he's kicking up
He's
about
not a huge fan of that. Well, he doesn't like things very heated, actually. He keeps his properties on the chilly side.
I don't know I could handle not having a duvet.
It's never going to be a problem for you,
Well, no, fair.
In case you get unless you get an invite to Balmoral.
But that must have been an adjustment for Queen Camilla.
I don't want to think about this too much, do you?
Going to bed with the hot chocolates.
Yeah. Moving on
to sunnier skies. So the royals are on holiday.
They are. When you say sunnier, and this week has been very sunny in the UK, in fact. It's been quite a treat for us. But they are up in Scotland, where the weather is not always nailed on as pushing the higher temperatures. Now, Balmoral's still open to visitors until around the 11th of August, I believe. And that's when they'll move into the big house. But he doesn't get to just put his feet up. He's going to be receiving his official red boxes of paperwork every day. And he has to receive prime ministers, not just ours, but other realm prime ministers. So it may be that he has the Prime Minister of Australia or New Zealand or Canada. And that's quite an unrelaxing thing to do during your holidays. I don't know about you. Do you ever host any government dignitaries?
Not off the top of my head, no. But this is interesting, though, because I bet the prime ministers must be so excited for this like little part of their job. Like, oh, yeah, Balmoral.
Well, excited, but also, I mean, you'd feel a bit daunted by it, wouldn't you?
Well, you know,
House party hosted by the king.
As depicted in The Crown, Margaret Thatcher was quite out of her depth.
Yeah,
it was. Well, I mean, the whole vibe that The Crown gave, which is obviously fictional.
Yeah,
that it's like is where they can really be themselves and really just be like a family and have fun. And I think Maggie didn't know which way to turn with them. The royals just sort of being silly and not the dignitaries that we know them to be.
Exactly. I think so. The thing that we're always told by people who have stayed up there as guests is that it's very informal. So the late Queen used to do the washing up. I think Dickie Arbiter told us that he once found himself next to her doing the washing up, and they had these famous picnics where the Duke of Edinburgh, the late Duke of Edinburgh, would oversee the lunch or the evening meal. And it was very much just like, your standard British family holiday, only with a few more grouse and a bit more land.
It's like a bit more hunting.
A bit more of that kind of
more
thing.
Land Rovers, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So Castle of May then, are they actually staying there or are they just staying near there?
They are staying in the
castle. Wow.
So visitors to the Castle of May can actually stay in a lodge that's been converted alongside that. But the Castle of May have just announced that you can go and have an exclusive dining experience there. So once the King and Queen have left for the summer, you're able to go in groups of up to 12, I believe. And it's not cheap. It's around £590 per head.
Wow.
But you get to go and basically have a beautiful 3-course meal, bespoke, created for you by a local chef at the King's dining table in his house.
We've worked hard on this podcast. I think Hello should.
What an away day that would be.
What an away day. That would be amazing.
Absolutely. And so, you get to go and dine. And then I think there's an optional gin or whiskey tasting in the drawing room afterwards. There is live pipe music, if that's your thing. And even if it's not, I think probably quite an experience.
Who wouldn't have that as their thing?
I think it would be rude not to. So that's out there and that's available to book now, which is quite a departure. And we've talked a lot about him opening things up. But I think this is aimed at giving people a taste of these historic buildings. And really that's what the King's Foundation does. It promotes historic buildings. It's all about conserving them, preserving them. So all the proceeds will go back into the charity to maintain that castle, but also to help educate students. There are people training in traditional crafts across, Scotland in Dumfries House and also down at Highgrove. So it's a great organisation.
He's very savvy with utilising his houses, isn't he, the king?
Yeah, look, he really believes that they should be a working part of the community, not just there, to be used by the royals as and when. I think he feels that if they're going to serve the community in some way, they have to be open a lot more frequently and accessible to the public.
Absolutely, I agree.
Do you do that with your castles?
Yeah. Like they're free for all, anytime.
Just selfless.
I just list them on Airbnb, and like anyone wants to book. Anyway, moving on. Should we talk about the Olympics a bit? Because I know it's your favourite thing in the world.
It is my favourite thing.
Have you been enjoying it?
I love it. I've been glued to it. Obviously doing my work as well.
Sure.
But I'm a huge Olympics fan.
Who doesn't seem like they're much of an Olympics fan?
Who?
King Charles.
Oh, now that's unfair.
Go on, fill me in.
I'm going to fill you in. So a lot of people have said to me this week, where are the British royals? So we've seen Maxima and Willem Alexander of the Netherlands with their daughters all wearing like coordinating orange outfits, really going for it in the stands. The Spanish royals have been there, the Belgians. People are really
Dog.
Snoop Dogg, the hip hop
Gaga.
royalty. Lady Gaga, all sorts of people have been seen.
She's a lady. She's not a queen. Anyway,
But it's been a huge turnout, and a lot of people are saying, well, where are the British royals? Now, they are overlooking a very important British royal, who is Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, of course, a bona fide Olympian.
She goes to everything, though.
She does, but,
she never stops.
She has been popping up here, there and everywhere, presenting medals to not just Team GB athletes, but others. But it's interesting, she's there because of her role with the British Olympic Association and the International Olympic Committee. The reason the King and Queen can't be more sort of overtly supportive of Team GB in particular is that he has all these overseas realms. So were he to show his support for Team GB, he would have to do the same for places like Australia and Canada, New Zealand. He'd have to really go out there and send messages of support to everyone, probably every day. So
Can't play favourites.
Can't play favourites.
Yeah.
No, and I think that I'm sure he'll send a message of congratulations at the end to Team GB and to others taking part. There was an exception. Queen Camilla did post something for the 3-day eventing champions, the British team, but that's because she's associated with the British Equestrian Federation. So they have to be really careful diplomatically about how they play this.
I've never really thought about that before, but I guess you can't be accused of favouritism there in these nations.
And I think it's only become a real question this week because there was such an outpouring of support for the England team during the Euros, for example.
Of course.
And the royals have been a lot more visible on social media, supporting things, speaking out. I think we should get into the Princess of Wales, and that means I think we should introduce our guest.
Lovely. Do you want to share a bit about who we're chatting to today?
We are speaking to royal author Robert Jobson, who's been dubbed the godfather of royal reporting by the Wall Street Journal, no less. He's been on the show before. He has been covering the beat since 1991. And he's here today to tell us all about his new book, Catherine, the Princess of Wales.
Amazing. And for those who are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see the copies down here.
Very beautiful.
Yeah. If you're listening, then head over to YouTube. And can't wait to chat to him.
Should we do it?
Let's do it.
Robert, welcome to the podcast in person for the first time. It's great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I know it's a really busy week for you with your book launch. We wanted to get straight into it. What made you want to write this in the first place?
Well, I got commissioned to write it in 2021 to start with. Paminda Mann, the CEO of Bonnier Books, we were having a lunch, and I actually went with the idea of updating my King book, which eventually did become Our King, which was a bestseller. But she said, no, and she's a working mum herself. She said, I want to know more about Kate. How does she do it? How does she look so amazing, yet look after her kids, do the professional work that she does, support her husband? And I then started thinking about it. I said, well, yeah, you're probably right. And then I thought, well, pretty soon, it's about, I suppose half of this job, as you know, is reading the runes, but she's going to be the Princess of Wales. And there's only been like 10 or 11 Princess of Wales, but we all think of the title relating to Diana. So it was just to look at that to start with, and I thought that would be quite interesting, given that she's wearing Diana's ring as her engagement ring, given that she's the Duchess of Cornwall didn't take the title, even though technically she was the Princess of Wales. So I thought looking at that to start with, and then it was about 40,000 words into it. I'd been speaking to people and got quite nice insight, I thought. And then I changed tack completely, and with everything that's been happening with the monarchy, went to write Our King. And then I went back to it about a year or so ago. And all the time you're still interviewing, still trying to find new details. And of course, then, about a good 3/4 of the way through, we had the announcement of her diagnosis, which then changed the approach. And it also gave it a huge hook as well. And I've been very lucky working with a great editor who was able to go through it all again. But, you couldn't just turn a book around like this in 6 months. And so it's been in the working for a long time, really.
How much must have changed since 2021 regarding Catherine? Yeah.
The whole platform of royalty has changed completely since 2021. And actually, that was quite interesting, going back and looking at what you'd already done. A lot of the history's stuff you could do in the childhood and things like that. But it was also making sure you could try to get a book about someone's life into 80,000 words. It's not that easy, I don't think. But she's a bit of an enigma, I think, Catherine. So it was to try to get a sense of who she really is in the overall book. I know we pick things out for passages and serializations, and I think I do get that. I do get more of a sense of who she is and what she does and how she approaches things. And you know, I was lucky enough to speak to some people that know I've met, as like you have, Emily, but she doesn't give a lot away.
No, she's very...
people, you know, I mean, what I found was quite interesting in all of this is that this is a girl that went to work on a double-decker bus, you know, like a lot of us have done in London. She went to very good schools, obviously, but her grandfather on the mother's side was a painter and decorator, so was mine. The reality is she's come from a different world from where her children are all born princes and princesses. Her husband was born a prince. You know, her father-in-law was always destined to be king. They are trying to be like ordinary people, but they have no idea. They've never had to worry about a mortgage. They've never had to worry about going to work. They've never had to really worry about what's mapped out for them in the years to come, you know. And even if you could say, well, William, he's been a helicopter pilot or he's been done this and that. There's all pretty much mapped out. He was never going to have to worry about it. Where, you know, let's be honest, in her mum and dad's life, there have been ups and downs with their business. It ended in a bad way after the pandemic. But she would have witnessed all of those things that people really have to face. And I think going forward for the monarchy, it's so important at this moment that you have someone who's really not just a people's princess, this beautiful person, but someone who is a princess of the people, who actually understands it in a way that her children will never be able to understand, nor will her husband, despite the fact he's seems to be, you know, normal guy. You know, he's got 3 homes, for example. Not many of us have those. So I would say she's the glue that keeps the monarchy going forward together. And you can see that the king, whereas years ago he may have been slightly jealous of Diana and the attention she got, I think he totally accepts the attention that Catherine gets and sees it's very important that she gets that.
I think you're so right in that, you know, as much as we, you know, see her a lot and we all really admire her and think she's sort of wonderful, it's like, it's hard to see behind the curtain there. Like, she doesn't give much away. Like, what are some of the most surprising things you learned about Catherine that you think readers would be surprised?
She's very smart. I think. Yeah. I think that there's a bit of an image about Catherine. I think that she's this sort of wife that's almost like a Stratford wife. You know, it's just, you know, it's a wrong image, I think, because this is a girl that is smart. She's steely. She's determined. She's not going to. She will make sure she defends her position. For example, when she first went into the royal family, the idea of getting the title of the Princess of Wales, she didn't really want to do that. And with her children, she was making it very clear to both the Queen and to the Prince of Wales, as he was, now the King, that she's not going to be rushed into doing things she doesn't necessarily want to do. That takes quite a lot of courage, I think, because you're in a very alien world, a world that some people, such as Meghan, have not really been able to cope with. And she was very much knew her position and stuck by her guns. I mean, a friend of her, well, someone who knows her very, very well, said to me, you know, she may be the only, you know, a commoner to become the next queen, but there's absolutely nothing common about her. She's very, very smart. She's driven. She's someone that seems to me that she knows, you know, when she's in public, she puts on her A game like no other person. I mean, I know Emily and I were in Boston, and when she went to Harvard there, she was in a room full of academics, professors, leaders in the field of what she does in terms of young early learning and child development and mental health. She was, you know, on a par with all of them. She could probably do a PhD on the subject now. And that is very different to the last Princess of Wales, who, though she was inspired in terms of she was creating this aura about her, you know, she would be the first to be academically, she wasn't the brightest, but she was in touch with people. But she wouldn't do it the same way that Catherine would. And I also think I'm very impressed by the way that she's able to put her husband and her children right at the forefront. And you get a sense even now going forward that if she would do what she has to do when she wants to do it, rather than it being her being said, well, we have to do this for duty at this time. I think she realises she only have one shot at this, and she's got 3 young children and they have to come first.
I think what's interesting to see going back through the book is looking back at the earlier days and, some stories that are familiar, but really thinking about them now with the passage of time, how, she had this struggle at Downhouse, prep school.
That was a pretty awful time. And, there was a lot of snobbery there. I mean, put it bluntly, there were a lot of people that, they just decided that they would pick on her. She was an outsider for a while. And I think she found that very difficult because up until that point, she'd never had anything like that. She'd always been, the captain of this and right at the centre of this in the drama, doing well in the drama, doing well in a class. And then she found people not really on the same wavelength. They played lacrosse there, not hockey. All sort of things that made her feel slightly she couldn't connect. And that actually changed completely when she went to Marlborough because they were very welcoming and very open. And she was able to at once breathe, if you like, and relax into what she did. And I think that probably helped her establish what she wanted to do in terms of working to help children have an experience. I loathe to call it bullying, but, that experience of rejection, I think that was quite important.
I would love to meet those girls who rejected her, as you say, because, if there's an element of snobbery and now she's the future Queen of England, I bet they have some regrets.
Well, yeah, but she faced a lot when she was William's girlfriend and people doing all this cross-check doors to manual nonsense and saying, your mum and dad worked in the airline industry. But she just, that's what I'm saying. She's a steely character. She's not somebody who's just going to bow down to people. But she, I think, plays her cards very close to her chest. What I did feel is I felt that she was very, very close to her father. And when she was at university, whether the fact he used to send little newspaper cuttings to her university for her to read, I thought that was quite a nice touch in terms of the relationship with her dad. And her mum, I think, comes across as a very important person in her life as well. So they've kept her pretty grounded, and I think that's very important.
I wanted to ask you about, I think you should ask this, being the big Crown fan, about Carol, because she is perhaps unfairly portrayed in the Crown
in the latest season.
And having engineered. Tell us
I mean,
what happened.
I think that the way that people have written about Carol is appalling, actually. It's snobbery, it has to be snobbery, but this is a woman that's done incredibly well in her life, but would she honestly have done that? No.
I think to explain to listeners and viewers, yes, this is to do with Kate changing her degree, moving to St Andrews rather than Edinburgh as originally planned.
I think what she realised, and a lot of kids realise when they leave school, is that maybe it was a bit of a rush to go straight to university. She was going to study art history, so why not go to Florence? Why not go to spend some time and watch and look at some of the most beautiful pieces of art? And she went on a special course there as well as doing the Raleigh International thing later on. I actually think she just needed a break from academia. And you've got to also remember, when she was in her first year at university, she was dating somebody else, Ruth Finch. She wasn't dating William. So therefore, if there was this, and he was dating somebody else as well. So if there was this great engineered thing, it wasn't going very well, was it?
I really like that this anecdote also has the element of that William has no choice in this. I mean, he's
it was forced on him.
Yeah, he doesn't have any
That's
free
the implication, isn't it?
Well, the other thing I did find out in all this is that, we all go about how they met at university. Actually, they were aware of each other before they went to university. They had met before university.
Really?
So, yeah. The way the kids from, say, Marlborough and Eton would, girls and boys would mingle and meet and whatever. So they had known each other before.
I did not know that.
No, nor did I, until I was told by
really
someone
fascinating.
Someone quite close to her. So,
and had some school discos together back in the day.
I think basically their paths have crossed.
Wow, okay.
So she wasn't a complete stranger.
No, so that's why probably they were able to develop a friendship quicker. I think that there's other things there. I think that, William, you've got to remember, he's a little bit younger than her. And so when dealing with that whole area in the book about the breakups and the things, it's fully understandable. They were in university, and the fact actually that they survived this long, if you've been in a university relationship, is, just shows you how much they're very much in love. But that 10-year courtship was very important, I think, in preparing her for what she had to do going forward, because it is, we saw it with Meghan, we saw it with other, but it's just, it can blow people away, and it did certainly happen to Diana.
Yeah.
And people should take that seriously, because it is very, very, very difficult having people around all the time, bodyguards all the time, aides that are all sycophantic to your face, but maybe backstabbing behind your back. All of this going on is a very difficult world, and Emily and I have been involved. We've all been involved in. I've done it for 35 years as journalists, and even now it's a bizarre world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting that what you said about her being a particular kind of person who can really handle that press attention. Do you think the Waity Katie years were good training for that?
I think the Waity Katie years were just typical, really cruel media, where they probably thought that she'd been around too long and wasn't going to get the job, so they would turn on her. Well, they made a mistake there, didn't they?
Didn't they? Yeah.
The reality. But I thought it was all nonsense, the Waity Katie thing. I mean, it's quite clear to me that even, in the moment that William effectively said that's it, dumped her, he realised just what a mistake he'd made within days, not weeks, and he had to then try and woo her back, which wasn't. I wouldn't imagine it would have been the easiest thing to do, and it wouldn't have been the easiest thing to do in dealing with the in-laws either.
No, God, can you imagine?
I'd love the full story of their breakup and reconciliation.
How do you think she's coped, though? I mean, how in the way that she's publicly handled it, she's never complained, apart from there are sort of a handful of occasions where they have steps in. And I'm thinking in particular of the Far East tour, which I know you were on.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I remember seeing them in the middle of it was in the Danam Valley in wherever the hell we were, Borneo, that's right. And they'd just recovered from the fact that they'd had all those topless pictures that had been published in by the French photographer, and then that she was then on that particular tour in Singapore, had to then speak publicly and was doing her best. And by the time they got to the jungle where I'd been, waiting for a couple of days with the orangutans, and they couldn't really tell us apart. So it was like, but when they got there, he was clearly furious, but she was quite bruised by it. But they still got on with it. There was a scene where they had to go up into the canopy of the rainforest, and a couple of my colleagues went up in the canopies, and they looked at me. I said, "I'm not going up there. I don't care what they say." And they went up, and they were game to do all these things. But I think at that time they were quite irritated, to say the least, about the way it had been handled and the way that the whole the intrusion level was too much. And I think it was a marker that needed to be laid down, and I think they did it well actually by taking it to law.
Tell us, Kate or Catherine?
Catherine, yeah.
What is your understanding of how that came about? Because in the book you talk about the fact that she let that be known to friends before the engagement, and that was one of the reasons people started to think it might happen. Well,
we've had a few queens called Catherine. I don't think we've had any Kates called Catherine.
Not yet, yeah.
Well, I already had. Henry VIII had several Catherines.
Yes,
Catherine of Aragon, Catherine Howard. I would say that all I would say on that is that William referred to her as Kate in many interviews until around about the time of the wedding, and then it suddenly sort of changed, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Didn't Harry call her Kathy? And then she was like, "Oh, I'll answer to anything, I suppose."
Oh, I don't know. He
did once call her. Yeah. But I think that it's Catherine for her. But I mean, William did used to call her Kate publicly, so we can only assume that's what he used to call her.
I know it's a hot topic of debate.
In the book, it's Catherine, Princess of Wales.
Yes, for your purposes, 100%. Tell us about the helicopter. This is something that has always intrigued me, the rules surrounding royals travelling together or not.
Well, the rules are rules that seem to change all the time, but I know that when the Queen Elizabeth was alive, she would just before she went to the flower show, I think, she was quite annoyed with William for taking a helicopter ride from London to Amber Hall with all the children in there, including George. And she made it, when, the Queen, she probably just raised an eyebrow when I say annoyed, but I think she did raise it with William. And I think he just got slightly ignored because he likes to helicopter them backwards and forwards. It's convenient to him. He's a very good helicopter pilot. He knows exactly what he's doing. But she, I think, from what I understand, Her Majesty reminded him of the line of succession. Now, since then, it's continued to happen. And I think the King, also given the fact the King has been through a life-changing experience and, probably thinking of his mortality and the future a lot, reminded through age, reminded William that he shouldn't be doing this. And I think got a pretty similar response. I would do what I want, sort of thing. And it was then asked to sign a decree, say, well, this is down to you. I think more than anything to try to focus one's mind. If you have to sign a piece of paper, it tends to focus your mind on it more and more, doesn't it?
Hang on, so Charles got him to sign a piece of paper saying, like, this is my fault if I accidentally kill everyone. What? I did not know that.
I need to read the book.
It's basically, that's the way, basically, I think, of the King saying, simply asking, be aware that you've got travelling with George in a helicopter. I mean, we've seen a number of helicopter incidents from the chairman of Leicester City to Matthew Harding at Chelsea. I mean, helicopters aren't necessarily the most wonderful safest way to travel. Some people might say I'm wrong, but having George and him or all of them in the aircraft at the same time is not always going to be helpful. And of course, if something terrible happened, it would be King Harry and Queen Meghan.
So going back to Catherine, I'll get it right. How do you think that she's dealt with comparisons to Diana? Because obviously, inevitably, they're going to happen.
Well, I'm probably one of the last of the Mohicans who covered the Diana as a reporter and knew her, spoke to her, got ticked off by her, so I know what she was like, and she can be changeable. How does she handle the comparisons? By knowing that she's, apart from the title and the ring that she wears on her left hand, there are no real massive similarities apart from the fact that she has this title. I mean, she's much older when she became the Princess of Wales, much wiser in that respect. Doesn't come from a noble family. Grandfather was a painter and decorator. There are so many differences. Education-wise, Diana didn't do particularly well academically. So they're very, very different people. What they've had to do is face the same media circus. Although I think in Kate's time, it has been more controlled from the Wild West time of Diana, thankfully, because it was out of control. So I think she handles it by just being herself and knowing that the only thing that she necessarily, she respects her mother-in-law, late mother-in-law's reputation, never met her, but obviously respects her. But it doesn't mean she has to do anything in any way the same as her.
How much of a mediator do you think she is, Catherine?
I think that she wouldn't even see it as that. I think she's hugely important when it comes to the relationship between the King and Prince William, and there's been differences in the past, and people might shoot me down, but there have been, not least over things like in the Ivory collection in the Royal collection. So, all things like that. So there are differences.
What happened with that?
Well, I mean, Prince William said he wanted to destroy all the ivory that's in the collection once he becomes king, which is, some of these things go back centuries,
Right.
And they're priceless items. There's the throne made of ivory, for example. And then he was reminded, by destroying all this ivory, you actually increase the value of the ivory. So there's been differences about that. And of course, I think even the King at this moment in time is busily making sure that this stuff cannot be destroyed. So as a mediator, I think that he clearly adores Kate. You don't have to look at the way the King greets Kate, makes a beeline for her every time he sees her. His eyes light up. I mean, he's such a charming man around women, the King. I mean, he really, he doesn't want to waste time speaking to men, but he's very charming to ladies most of the time. And I think that he, sees, I mean, they call him Grandpa, and I think you can see his relationship with Louis, how he can calm him down, and she is able to get him to, make sure that he facilitates to see his grandchildren whenever that can be done. So he clearly adores her, and she gets on very well, and has made a point of getting on well with the Queen Camilla, taking those photographs at that photo shoot. But more than that, organising things, being able to deal with things when maybe guys like Prince William may have just blown a gasket or something. She's very calm. She's the solution, but person who wants to find solutions rather than and rise above the noise and the drama. And I think given what she's gone through just now, I think from people I've known that have been in a similar situation, you don't want to waste any time on noise and drama. When you've had anything to do with your health, you live day by day, you do the things you want to do, you do the things with the people you love, and if the people that you don't like, you just don't bother with them.
Yeah.
And I think most people that have been through that, and both the King and Catherine, who famously had that lunch together just before she announced that she had the diagnosis, they both realised that. And I think that's a real connection for them.
It's interesting, just going back to her this ability to sort of be the glue. One of the moments that stands out in my memory was at Prince Philip's funeral when she was seen walking alongside Prince Harry and then sort of just neatly led him up to William and sort of left them to it. I mean, do you think that was just for the cameras?
I actually think it was a natural moment. I think if you look at the way she did it, I mean, you've got to remember that Catherine and Harry got on very well. I mean, they were always almost endlessly. He was like the guy that was always there when he was in the early years, popping in, and I just think they had a good relationship, but it was a natural relationship. So she was more able to do that and then just move to. I don't think it was done for the cameras. I think it was a natural move, really. But then again, things have happened since then that have made it very difficult. And she has to remain loyal to the crown, her son is going to be the king and her husband's going to be the king. And some of the things that have been said have been, frankly, nasty.
It does feel like Catherine's...
You've adopted this fully now.
I've adopted it. Yeah. Sort of slowly but surely created these boundaries in the royal family, which perhaps didn't exist before, like specifically having a private family life and having your public royal duties. And I think, within like maternity leave and things like that, that's a big part of it.
Oh, but she's right, isn't she?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I think that you've got to remember that her children are very, very young. This is a time that she won't get back again. The difference between other people is that, in your career, you may have different phases. With her career, it's only going to get more and more official.
Yeah. She'll
become the Queen, the consort, and then Queen Catherine. And that's a different role completely from being the Princess of Wales. So I think that the Prince of Wales, I know he was completely crestfallen when he found out his father had the diagnosis, and then to have his wife, with 3 young children. Imagine the stress that he was under, thinking that anything could happen. Mm-hmm. And he rose to that. I thought he rose to it very, very well. But what it shows you is that any moment, nobody knows, that your life, like the life of the late Queen Elizabeth, could change overnight. And so I think it's right that they have a chance to spend as much time with their young family as they can and organise their time. I know there's media, we want to see more of her, we want to have more pictures. I think she's aware of that, as we saw with Trooping the Colour, and we saw with
Wimbledon,
which I thought really were about right. I mean, but you got to remember would have had to put on, that was so tight, you've got to put on that show knowing that everybody is going to be looking at you. I mean, it's bad enough for any woman when they've got to go out, but, everybody is got to be putting on, a guy would just put on a jacket and he doesn't have to care. They'll be examining what her hair looks like, how thin is she, what shoes she's wearing, what dress, does that dress look good, what's with her makeup? And all of those things will be analysed to the nth degree. That's stressful.
Yeah.
Particularly when you've not been well and you're tired going through this treatment. So I think that she should be allowed to manage this in a way and we should expect her to manage it in a way that doesn't mean, it's September, you've got to get back to work. Because I don't think that's going to be the way it's going to happen anyway. I think now, more than ever, William will probably take a lead on a lot of things, and as Prince of Wales, and she will be allowed to do that role as mother and supporter, and also do the things that she wants to do with the early learning. And I think that should be totally accepted.
Yeah.
Because, with these things, and anybody who knows anything about cancer, 1 minute you're fine, and all of a sudden something can take over again. So, it's so important that she's allowed to manage her life how she feels. And I think that all the media and everybody, the people, and their expectations of her should be put into perspective, and so that we have her, as long as possible, because we want her to live a long and fruitful life till she's queen. So it's very important that I know, for example, at the moment, the Queen Camilla is getting exasperated with the king because he never stops.
Yeah.
And he's gone rushing straight back into everything. And you can't stop him. He's like an automaton. Whereas at least she is listening to her body. Hopefully the king will listen to his.
Maybe she can influence him. Get him to chill out a little bit.
Someone should, but it's not easy, is it?
No.
It does feel like the saying this year is probably, because of circumstances, probably the least we've ever seen her in many years. It does feel like she's perhaps more popular than ever. Would you say that was true?
When I started to write the book, people used to struggle with understanding what the Duchess of Cambridge was, or who she is, or why. Is she a princess? Is she Princess Kate? What is she? And we'd have all these endless nonsense arguments online. You should drive a woman mad. So now when she became the Princess of Wales, I think it's sort of, the word princess made a big difference in terms of people's understanding. And I think that she certainly has captured the imagination. She's a woman of her time. She said, it's been to work on a double-decker bus. She's got, she's been on the underground before she had bodyguards with her. So she understands a lot. And I think that she's important as that glue with the people, very much so. And I think that's where I think that she's so important. But the thing with her at this moment in time is she's that moment when the people realised that when she declared what was wrong with her, and then she was bravely did that in front of the television. A lot of people were deeply moved by that. I mean, I thought it was you had to pinch yourself to stop choking back tears, particularly when she talked about her children and she looked down and you thought, this is really bad, and I think people realised what they had for the first time, whereas before everyone was going on about Diana or whatever, they suddenly realised, but Kate's very important to us.
Yeah.
And this book, for example, is to give an idea of that. People say, she doesn't publish photographs like Diana did. To give an idea of it, this book is published into 19 different languages across Europe. Now, that means that somewhere on the line, 19 different publishers all wanted to get involved in the book. Somewhere on the line, she's captured the imagination. And it's not just because of the illness. It's a realisation, I think, of, she is rather important.
Yeah.
She is important, and she plays a role in our lives because she's not been flaunting herself in front of everyone. She's very much a lady, and she really does do things in a very subtle way. But people realised she's special. And I think that, to me, shows you, if the whole of Europe are very interested in reading about her, that they're fascinated by her.
Well, and the Americans.
The Americans too, Americans are very much so, but that would be the same normally anyway with a book publication. America, Australia, South Africa, and it would all be in English. But actually, and you'd probably publish maybe in French or German, but this has gone in Lithuania, Slovakia, Polish. So it just shows you there's a real
universal interest.
Fascination. Yeah.
This, we talked earlier about the fact that she doesn't need to rush back to work, but really she is playing a very long game in every sense, isn't she? Because this is a lifelong role for her. How do you think she is going to be as Queen?
Well, I'm very supportive of William. I think it'll be important because I think it's clear we see her, don't we? I remember being in Belize where he's just about to make a speech, William, and she's there talking to him into his ear just before, making sure he's okay, reassured, and they would have obviously gone through the speeches together. Things that for many years the Prince of Wales, the King, didn't have. So I think they play a very important role as a double act, and she very much supports him. So I think that'll be important because it's a lonely existence, flying around the world half the time as they will do as King and Queen, and without that person you can kick your shoes off at the end of the day and chat to, and I think it must be quite, it must have been quite a hell, I would have thought at times for Charles. So that's important, and I think that she'll continue to do, I think, her work with mental health and early learning, but I don't think she's going to be sort of doing millions and millions of engagements to just clock up the number of engagements. She'll be there in I think, a very formal role supporting the new king. But that said, they've got a tough job. We live in a world when the Queen Elizabeth came to the throne, and it was a very deferential society. It was a very class-ridden society. It was a very different world. I think they did a poll. 50% more than thought that she had been, essentially appointed by God. It's a very different world, and they're going to be in a multicultural, multi-faith society with a lot of younger people that wonder what they're all about anyway, and so they've got to appeal to them without. And I'm just wondering how many young people that around are that bothered about all of the wearing of the cloaks and all of these things, awarding people Order of the British Empire when the British Empire doesn't exist anymore. I think things are going to have to change.
Yeah.
And significantly, because things like Order of the British Empire, just even its very name sounds backdated. Why shouldn't it? But why can't it be Order of Merit or Order of something else? I just think that they've got to look at where society is and be relevant to that society. That's a difficult job, to be on the cusp of. You are, after all, elected and unelected. It's an unelected institution, but you've got to be on the cusp of what is new, but also retain some of the tradition. So it's a difficult game. And they've got a tough task, in my opinion.
Rob, it's absolutely fascinating. I could talk to you all day. I think we'll carry on talking once we've wrapped here.
Well, I'll tell you about what was really
Tell me what you really think. Thank you so much for coming on, and please come again soon.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, look what happened there.
Wow, where did that come from? It was great to have Rob on the podcast in person for the first time.
It really was. He has got some amazing stories.
He certainly has. That's a long time on the Royal Beat.
And I think maybe a few more with the recordings off.
Yes.
So on that note,
that's everything from us today. Thank you so much to Rob and to you two for joining us. We'll be back very soon.
Yes, do stay in touch about season 4. But in the meantime, you can catch more from Hello with our news and entertainment show, The Daily Lowdown, available on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts. Bye. Cheers.